The track passes through an increasingly densely populated area beside the shoreline of Semiahmoo Bay and along inaccessible ocean bluffs that are prone to landslides and erosion. The potential for a rail accident on the scale of Lac-Mégantic is very real. The same crude oil that exploded there passes through here.
That's true.
The consequence of such a scenario would be devastating to the communities and to the environment. In spite of this, emergency response planning for communities by all levels of government has been dismal. The question posed is, what changes at the federal level would you implement to ensure the safety of our community?
I've been a resident of Surrey for 40 years, and I live about 1 kilometer from the White Rock Beach. You know, I really have salt air in my blood because I have lived here for many, many years. And I've followed this closely growing wave of community anxiety as the trains got longer, the cargo got more dangerous, and the concerns around Canada from Lac-Mégantic we began to look around our community and think that is possible. 25 years on Surrey Council, we also brought forward a Delcan report many years ago that gave us an insight into what would happen if we relocated the railroad. This is not a new issue to me. It's one that certainly has been resurrected because of the concerns, but it is an issue nonetheless that has permeated many years in this area. Rail issues involve international treaties, federal statutes, railway property rights, as well as provincial, metropolitan, First Nations, and city interests and responsibilities. There are complicated national and international considerations involving all these movement of commodities. Even the smallest policy, legislative, and project steps involve many parties. Your question brings to light serious and significant points that are all highly relevant, and I want to address them when I'm elected. I pledge to you that if I become the next representative of South Surrey White Rock, I will make sure that these concerns are brought to Ottawa and emphasize the emergency of this issue.
Thank you, Judy.
There's nothing more important than the safety of our loved ones, our homes, and our beautiful coastal environment. Even one trail derailment would be one derailment too many. Lac-Mégantic was a wake-up call, but the Harper Conservatives pushed the snooze button and went back to sleep. They cut the funding for the Joint Emergency Preparedness Program. They cut the funding to municipalities to provide first responders with the equipment and the training that they need in order to deal with disasters like that. And they also cut the funding to the Emergency Management College so that there was no place for training anymore. We need a national transportation strategy with a railway safety component and provisions to do a number of things. First of all, to ensure that first responders get timely advance notice of what dangerous goods are on what trains and when these trains are likely to pass through our community. That way, our first responders can be ready with the equipment and the gear they need in the event that there is an accident. The national transportation strategy that the NDP contemplate would also ensure that rail cars and other railway infrastructure, such as the tracks and the rail beds, switching stations, things like that, are upgraded so that they meet tough modern safety standards. Anything less is just plain unacceptable. We also need to be able to ban the transport by rail of dangerous substances that pose the highest risk if they get into the environment.
Thank you, Pixie.
Emergency prevention and emergency response planning
need to be decentralized away from the federal government and into the provincial and municipal governments. Libertarian leader Tim Moen, who worked as a paramedic, spoke out against how the ambulance services got slower in Fort McMurray, where he worked, when the Alberta government decentralized the service. The solution is for local municipalities to have career-trained individuals who know the area. Education and training is key and needs to be tailored in each individual municipality. This way we can ensure the safety of our community and have more specialized services. Thank you.
I'm sure most of you know that transportation of the hazardous goods through our community is a threat to our health and our safety, and perhaps our survival, the survival of thousands of people who could be affected in the case of a situation like Lac Mégantic. So obviously we need strict rules on rail safety to ensure the safe movement of those industrial goods, such as chlorine, ammonia, butane, propane, sulfuric acid. All of these things are being shipped along our coastline. Coal and volatile crude oil, and that is what exploded in Lac Mégantic. We need to prevent the tragedy that would be caused by a derailment with some of those goods. And I just want to talk about that incident in Quebec, because 47 people died as a result, and 7 were never found after that explosion. The cleanup will cost at least $2 billion, but the train company has gone out of business, and so the cost for that will all be borne by the taxpayers. But that is the nature of corporations. While the Green Party is in favor of expanding rail transport, as I mentioned, we firmly oppose the shipping of U.S. thermal coal for many reasons, which I'm sure we will get into further tonight. Canadians, but as Pixie mentioned, Canadians have an inherent right to protect themselves and their families from lethal threats created by foreign business ventures. If American communities can reject the coal shipments, why can't we? But instead of conspiring to push this project through, our federal government should be defending all Canadians' rights to protect themselves from a serious danger imposed by foreign interests. And instead, they're secretly negotiating trade deals like FIPA with China, and now the TPP, giving foreign investors the right to sue our federal, provincial, and municipal governments for passing laws that protect our health and safety. All those corporate investors have to do to claim these laws is deny to make a claim is to deny that they. I'm not doing this very well, am I?
Thank you, Larry.
I've run out of time. Yeah.
Whenever regulatory considerations are discussed, the Harper government falls back on calls for less regulation and smaller government and tries to buy support by claiming the result will lower taxes. This is an ideological approach rather than a science-based or knowledge-based approach. It leads to half measures or none at all when informed public policy is called for. We need to put ideological approaches behind us to address real-world problems. In 2013, for example, Transport Minister Lisa Raitt announced that the so-called protective direction from the federal government means that rail companies that transport dangerous goods must provide municipalities with detailed information on their cargo every 3 months. Well, that may sound good at first blush, but none of the information was to be provided in advance. These new federal measures forcing rail companies to tell municipalities which dangerous goods have been transported to their communities after the fact barely deserve Calgary Mayor Nenshie's description as a step in the right direction. He was reacting to 2 Calgary train derailments also in 2013. He also said, though, we need to craft a new system with shippers and railroads, and it must be under government regulation, where a first responder standing at the scene of a derailment can look at the code on the side of a car, type it into their phone, and immediately know what's in that car and know how to respond. Even that is a short-term goal. We need to restore funding to emergency services like the Coast Guard, where the pursuit of a balanced budget for election purposes and ideology puts lives and the environment at risk. We need to end the silencing of federal scientists whose research is at odds with the political objectives of the Harper government. We need to coordinate emergency services and federal emergency management better. putting aside the Harper government's provincialism that sees Canadian federalism as states' rights-based and to limit the role of the federal government in the life of Canadians, including in matters of public policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
I think that it's very important to also to establish transportation corridors. I mentioned the importance of moving the rail line, and I think that we need to establish in a national transportation strategy specifically dedicated transportation corridors through our communities. And this, I know the NDP doesn't have a written national transportation strategy in its policy book right now, because it is our firm belief that such a policy needs to be developed through consultation and collaboration with municipalities, provincial governments, citizens groups, and First Nation communities, because these are the communities that should be served by the policy, and their needs and their concerns should be reflected in the policy itself, so there's our strategy itself. So that's why we don't have an already off-the-shelf model ready to go.
Thank you, Pixie.
I would like to say that safety is an absolutely critical concern, and over the years, the trains, when the trains got longer and the dangerous goods got more dangerous, it just sort of slipped in. There was no consultation with communities. There was certainly no consultations with cities or municipalities, and even sometimes the provincial government did not know what was coming on. Therefore, it is essential, and when I worked with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, one of the railroads, which was CN, often was trying to deal with how do you deal with issues in the community. And they were trying to set up a tribunal process in which they as a railroad could sit down with the members of the community and discuss the issues, and particularly the safety issues. That has never happened with BNSF, and so it has to, and I believe that is a critical component when you're dealing with such changes that happen over time, and we never ever have an opportunity to have input.
Something else I wanted to state, actually the first question we were asking, the rail line around the peninsula was not intended for 100-car coal trains when it was established 100 years ago. Vibration causing landslips are almost certain to occur in my view, and we need to at least understand the risks in place. We need a thorough geotechnical review paid for by the users, the railway, to establish the risks caused by the simple movement of trains and a hazard assessment based on the materials being shipped. That I draw upon based on my experience in looking at natural disaster mitigation. The Lac-Mégantic tragedy stands out as an example of just how serious the risk really is, both for White Rock, for the White Rock waterfront, and for Crescent Beach, which would be cut off by a train derailment, or for that matter, when long trains rumble through it.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I just want to say quickly that we need to reverse direction in terms of what our government has been doing over the last number of years of deregulation. We have to start bringing back the regulations that we had previously and then actually making them more stringent. The deregulation has moved us to, they call it safety management systems, which simply means that the train companies regulate themselves, if you can imagine that. So we need to implement more strict regulations. We also have to bring back the ability of Transport Canada to do their job. There have been so many government cutbacks of the engineers at Transport Canada, and they do crucial work, and we need to take that seriously and give them the proper funds and human resources that they need.